Welcome to the video. Before we begin, I suggest you subscribe to the channel and we begin. Lila had always been her father's shadow. She was the youngest of 3 siblings, and her father had taken it upon himself to mold her into his little helper. As a child, she would follow him around the farm, helping with chores and learning about the land. It was in the barn where she had learned the most. Her father taught her how to tend to the animals and how to mend fences. Now Lila was a grown woman, but she still felt the pull towards the barn. She had moved out of her parents' home and into the city, but she missed the quiet life of the farm. So when her father called her up and asked her to come for a visit, she jumped at the opportunity. It was a warm summer evening when she arrived. Her father greeted her with a warm embrace and a hearty meal. After dinner, as the sun began to set, her father said, "Go to the barn." Lila was confused, but she obeyed. As she walked towards the barn, she noticed that her father was following her. When they reached the door, he turned to her and said, "I have something to show you." He opened the door and Lila gasped in shock. The barn was filled with candles and fairy lights, casting a warm glow of the space. In the center of the room was a table, covered in a white tablecloth and surrounded by chairs. Lila's father walked her over to the table and pulled out a chair for her. He then proceeded to bring out dish after dish of delicious food, and they dined together, enjoying each other's company. As they sat there, under the twinkling lights, Lila realized that her father had done all of this for her. He had created a magical evening just for her. Tears streamed down her face as she realized how much her father loved her. When the meal was over, Lila hugged her father tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "This is the best night of my life." They walked out of the barn together, both of them beaming with joy. As they looked up at the stars, Lila's father turned to her and said, "You know, I never want you to forget where you come from. The farm will always be your home." Lila nodded, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. She knew that, no matter where life took her, she would always have her roots firmly planted in the farm. As they walked back to the house, Lila couldn't help but think that sometimes the most unexpected moments can turn out to be the most magical. They entered the house and Lila's father poured them each a glass of his homemade wine. They sat in the living room, reminiscing about old times and catching up on each other's lives. As the night wore on, Lila's father grew quiet. She could sense that he had something important to say. Finally, he spoke up. "Lila, I'm not getting any younger, and I want to make sure you're taken care of after I'm gone." Lila's heart sank. She had always known that her father was mortal, but the thought of losing him was unbearable. "Dad, I don't want to talk about this," she said, her voice trembling. "I know it's hard, but it's important," her father replied. "I want to make sure you're set up for the future. I'm going to leave the farm to you, Lila. It's yours, to do it as you please." Lila couldn't believe what she was hearing. The farm, the place where she had grown up, where she had learned so much from her father, it was going to be hers. She felt overwhelmed with gratitude and sadness all at once. "Dad, I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything," he replied, pulling her into a hug. "Just promise me that you'll take care of it, that you'll keep the land healthy and the animals happy. Promise me you'll never forget where you come from." "I promise," Lila said, her voice choked with emotion. As the night came to a close, Lila hugged her father tightly, knowing that this might be the last time they saw each other. She left the farm with a heavy heart, but also with a renewed sense of purpose. She knew what she had to do. Lila threw herself into the farm with a newfound passion. She took care of the animals, planted new crops, and repaired the fences. She made the farm into a thriving, sustainable business, one that would last for generations to come. Years later, as Lila stood in the barn, looking out over the land, she thought about her father and all that he had done for her. She realized that his gift had not just been the farm, but also the love and guidance he had given her over the years. As she stood there, the sun setting behind her, Lila knew that she would never forget where she came from. The farm would always be her home, and her father would always be with her in spirit, guiding her every step of the way. Suddenly, Lila was jolted out of her thoughts by a sound coming from the entrance of the barn. She turned around to see a man standing in the doorway, looking at her with a mixture of surprise and admiration. "Excuse me," he said, "I'm looking for Lila. Is that you?" Lila nodded, feeling a sense of unease. She didn't recognize this man, and she wondered how he had found her. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said, walking towards her. "My name is Jack, and I'm a real estate agent. I was wondering if you might be interested in selling this farm." Lila felt her blood boil. How dare this stranger come onto her property and try to buy it from her? This farm was her life, her father's legacy, and she would never sell it to anyone. "No, I'm not interested," she said, her voice cold. Jack looked surprised. "Are you sure?" I could offer you a good price. You could move somewhere else, start a new life." "I don't want a new life," Lila said firmly. "This farm is my home, and it always will be. Now please, leave." Jack nodded, looking slightly ashamed. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. I just thought, well, never mind. Goodbye, Lila." As Jack walked out of the barn, Lila couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. She had stood up for herself and her father's legacy, and she had won. She knew that she would never let anyone take this farm away from her. As she walked out of the barn, she looked up at the stars and thought about her father. She knew that he would be proud of her, that he would smile down on her from wherever he was. She knew that he would always be with her, guiding her every step of the way. And as she walked back to the farmhouse, Lila knew that, no matter what the future held, she would always have this place, this farm, this home. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Lila continued to work tirelessly on the farm, and her hard work paid off. The crops were flourishing, the animals were healthy, and the farm was making a profit. But despite her success, Lila couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. She had always been content with her simple life on the farm, but now she found herself longing for something more. One day, as she was tending to the chickens, Lila saw a car pull up to the farm. A young man got out, carrying a backpack and a guitar case. He looked up and saw Lila watching him, and he smiled. "Hi," he said. "I'm Jake. I'm looking for a place to stay for a few nights. I'm a musician, and I'm traveling around the country playing gigs." Lila felt a sense of excitement. She had always loved music, and she had never met anyone quite like Jake before. "Well, I don't know if I have much to offer in terms of accommodations," she said, "but you're welcome to stay here if you like." Jake grinned. "That's all I need. Thank you so much." Over the next few days, Lila and Jake became fast friends. They spent their days working on the farm, and their nights playing music and talking under the stars. Lila found herself drawn to Jake's free spirit and his passion for life. As the days passed, Lila began to realize that she had feelings for Jake. She tried to ignore them, to push them aside, but they wouldn't go away. She found herself thinking about him all the time, wondering what it would be like to be with him. Finally, one night, as they sat around a bonfire, Lila couldn't take it anymore. She turned to Jake and said, "I know this might sound crazy, but I think I'm in love with you." Jake's eyes widened in surprise. "Really? I had no idea. I mean, I've been feeling the same way, but I didn't want to say anything." Lila felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had been so afraid that Jake wouldn't feel the same way, but now she knew that he did. They leaned in to kiss each other, but just as their lips were about to touch, they heard a loud crash coming from the barn. Lila and Jake jumped up and ran towards the sound. When they got to the barn, they saw that the roof had collapsed, crushing several of the animals inside. Lila felt a sense of despair wash over her. All of her hard work, all of her dreams for the farm, seemed to have been destroyed in an instant. But then Jake spoke up. "We can fix this," he said. "We can rebuild the barn, and we can make it even better than before. We can do this together." Lila felt a surge of hope in her heart. She realized that Jake was right. They could fix this together. And maybe, just maybe, they could build something even greater than what they had before. As they worked together to rebuild the barn, Lila and Jake grew even closer. They laughed, they cried, they played music, and they fell more in love with each passing day. And in the end, Lila realized that the unexpected ending to her story wasn't the collapse of the barn, or even the love she found with Jake. It was the realization that, no matter what happened, she would never be alone. She had her father's legacy, she had her home on the farm, and she had the love and support of the person she cared about most in the world. Months passed and the barn was rebuilt, stronger and more beautiful than before. Lila and Jake continued to work on the farm, tending to the animals, harvesting the crops, and playing music together. They were happy, but they both knew that their time together was limited. Jake was a traveler, and he couldn't stay in one place for too long. One day, as they were sitting on the front porch watching the sunset, Jake turned to Lila and said, "I have to go. I can't stay here forever, and I don't want to hold you back from living your life." Lila felt a lump form in her throat. She had known that this day would come, but she didn't want to believe it. "I don't want you to go," she said, her voice shaking. "I love you, Jake. I want you to stay here with me." Jake took her hand and looked into her eyes. "I love you too, Lila, but sometimes the best thing we can do is let go. I'll never forget you, and I'll always cherish the time we spent together." With tears in her eyes, Lila watched as Jake packed up his guitar and his backpack and walked out of her life. For days, Lila felt lost and alone. She missed Jake terribly, and she didn't know how she would go on without him. But then, one night, as she was sitting on the front porch looking up at the stars, she heard a familiar melody coming from the barn. She got up and walked towards the barn, and as she got closer, she realized that it was Jake playing his guitar. He had left it behind as a gift to her. Lila smiled through her tears as she listened to Jake's music. She knew that he was gone, but she also knew that he had left a part of himself with her. She felt a sense of peace and gratitude, knowing that she had experienced a great love and that she would always carry it with her. And so, Lila continued to work on the farm, playing music and tending to the land. She knew that her life would never be the same without Jake, but she also knew that she was strong enough to carry on. And every time she heard the sound of Jake's guitar coming from the barn, she felt his love and his spirit surrounding her, reminding her that she was never truly alone. Years passed and Lila grew old, but the memory of Jake and their love never faded. She continued to work on the farm, and as time went on, she passed on her knowledge to her children and grandchildren. The farm remained in the family for generations, and every once in a while, one of Lila's descendants would hear the sound of Jake's guitar coming from the barn. One day, when Lila was in her 90s, she sat on the front porch, looking out at the land that she had tended to for so many years. She felt a sense of peace and contentment, knowing that she had lived a full and meaningful life. As she closed her eyes and took a deep breath, she heard a familiar voice say, "Go to the barn, Lila." She opened her eyes and saw Jake standing in front of her, smiling. He looked just as she remembered him, young and vibrant, with his guitar slung over his shoulder. Lila's heart filled with joy and wonder. "Jake," she whispered. Jake nodded. "It's time to go, Lila. Are you ready?" Lila took a deep breath and stood up, feeling a sense of excitement and anticipation. She knew that this was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment when she would be reunited with the love of her life. Hand in hand, Lila and Jake walked towards the barn, surrounded by the warm glow of the setting sun. As they entered the barn, the sound of Jake's guitar filled the air, and Lila felt a sense of peace wash over her. And then, without warning, the barn burst into a dazzling array of colors and light, enveloping Lila and Jake in a brilliant glow. Lila felt her body dissolve, and she was lifted up into the air, soaring towards the heavens. She felt a sense of freedom and liberation, as if she was finally breaking free from the confines of her physical body. As she looked down at the earth below, she saw her farm, her family, and the legacy that she had left behind. And she knew that even though she was no longer a part of that world, her love and her spirit would live on. And then, with a final burst of light, Lila disappeared into the heavens, leaving behind a world that was forever changed by her presence and her love. As Lila ascended into the heavens, she felt a sense of peace and fulfillment wash over her. She knew that her time on earth was over, but she also knew that she had left behind a legacy that would endure for generations to come. As she looked around, she saw other souls who had passed on, all moving towards a bright light in the distance. She felt a sense of excitement and curiosity, wondering what lay beyond. As she approached the light, she saw a figure standing in front of her, surrounded by a bright aura. It was a woman, dressed in flowing white robes with long golden hair that shimmered in the light. The woman smiled at Lila and spoke in a gentle voice. "Welcome, dear one. You have lived a life of love and service, and you are now ready to enter the next phase of your journey." Lila felt a sense of awe and wonder as she gazed upon the woman. She knew that this was a divine being, one who held the key to her ultimate destiny. The woman took Lila's hand and led her towards the light. As they entered the light, Lila felt a sense of warmth and love enveloping her. She felt as if she was being embraced by the universe itself. And then, suddenly, she was standing in front of a grand hall, surrounded by countless souls who had passed on before her. She saw faces that she recognized, friends and family who had gone before her, all smiling and welcoming her into their midst. As Lila looked around, she felt a sense of wonder and awe. She knew that she had entered a realm that was beyond her wildest imagination, a place of infinite possibility and potential. And then, suddenly, she heard Jake's voice calling out to her. She turned around and saw him standing in front of her, smiling as he had always done. "Welcome, Lila," he said, taking her hand. "We have so much to show you." Lila felt a sense of joy and relief as she felt Jake's hand in hers. She knew that she was not alone, that he was there with her, guiding her on this new journey. As they walked through the hall, Lila saw wonders beyond her wildest imagination. She saw fields of flowers that stretched out as far as the eye could see, mountains that reached up to the heavens, and oceans that shimmered with 1,000 colors. And as she gazed upon these wonders, she knew that she had entered a realm of infinite possibility and potential, a world that was beyond her wildest imagination. And with Jake by her side, she knew that she would explore this new world with wonder and awe, embracing the endless possibilities that lay before her. As Lila and Jake explored this new realm, they encountered many other souls who had passed on. They met people from all walks of life, from all corners of the world, each with their own story to tell. Lila listened to their stories with fascination, hearing tales of adventure, love, loss, and triumph. She realized that even in death, there was still so much to learn and experience. One day, as they were walking through a forest of towering trees, Jake turned to Lila and said, "I have something to show you." He led her to a clearing, where a group of people were gathered around a campfire. They were singing and playing music, and Lila recognized some of the faces as people she had known in her life. As she watched, one of the musicians handed Jake a guitar, and he began to play. The music was unlike anything Lila had ever heard before, a combination of joy and sorrow, love and loss, that stirred something deep within her. And as the music played, Lila felt a sense of peace and contentment wash over her. She realized that this was the essence of life itself, the beauty that lay within every moment, no matter how small or insignificant. And then, suddenly the music stopped, and the campfire disappeared, leaving Lila and Jake standing alone in the clearing. Lila looked around, feeling a sense of loss and longing. She realized that this was a fleeting moment, one that could never be recaptured. But then Jake turned to her, and she saw a twinkle in his eye. "Come on, Lila," he said. "There's more to see." And with that, they set off once again, exploring this new realm with wonder and curiosity, embracing the endless possibilities that lay before them. And as they journeyed through this new world, Lila knew that she had found her true home, a place where she could explore and learn and grow, surrounded by love and beauty and possibility. And with Jake by her side, she knew that she would never be alone, that together they would embrace this new journey with wonder and awe, always searching for the next adventure, the next moment of beauty and joy. Years passed as Lila and Jake continued their journey through the afterlife. They explored countless realms, encountering new wonders and meeting countless souls along the way. Through it all, Lila remained grateful for the opportunity to experience this new world, to explore and learn and grow in ways she never thought possible. And through it all, Jake remained by her side, a constant source of strength and guidance, a true friend and companion. But then, one day, as they were walking along a quiet beach, Jake turned to Lila with a solemn look in his eyes. "Lila," he said softly, "it's time for me to go." Lila felt a lump rise in her throat as she looked at Jake. She knew that this day would come, but it still hurt to think of saying goodbye to her friend and companion. "I'll miss you, Jake," she said softly, tears welling up in her eyes. "I'll miss you too, Lila," Jake said, taking her hand. "But remember, I'll always be with you, in your heart, in your memories, in the very fabric of your being." And with those words, Jake disappeared, leaving Lila standing alone on the beach. For a moment, she felt lost and alone, unsure of how to continue on without her friend by her side. But then she remembered Jake's words, and she felt a sense of comfort and peace wash over her. She knew that he was right, that he would always be with her, no matter where her journey took her. And with that knowledge, Lila continued on, exploring this new world with wonder and curiosity, embracing the endless possibilities that lay before her. And though she missed Jake terribly, she knew that he was still with her, guiding her on this new journey, and she was grateful for the time they had spent together and the memories they had created. And so, Lila continued on, forever curious, forever learning, forever grateful for the chance to explore this new world with wonder and awe.